Hello and welcome to Thursday night on the PEG channels, wherever you may be tuning in. And this is Savage Universe, and I am here. I'm JM. There's a show where we talk about everything that's out in the Savage Universe. And so today I've got Carl from Tabletop Tango, prepared to jump through a series of complex and ever-increasingly difficult puzzles in a saw-like... welcome, Carl.
I'm never going to live that down, am I?
Oh my gosh, it was so
quiz
much
show.
fun. Like, please don't. Like, I love the quiz shows. Anytime you want to do another one, I'm there. We were actually talking about it at GameholeCon at the gate when we were flying out. I flew out of the same gate that a lot of the other PEG guys were flying out of. So it was like Don and his wife, and Chris Valentine was there, and I know I'm forgetting somebody. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting you. And we were talking about the quiz show and how Don got distracted and vulnerable because he's like, it's the only thing I know that we have that has an ampersand in it.
Yeah.
So we're still talking about it. It was great. So we're actually here to talk about, I saw a couple of posts that you had made, and I don't know whether YouTube was just dredging them out of the depths of time and, kind of bringing them up to the surface, or how I came across it. But you were doing a conversion of the Dragonlance adventures from first edition D&D into Savage Worlds for a convention, correct?
Yeah, it was actually a number of my own modules that I had to convert to be able to do a convention. They were actually ones that were done, like last time I ran them was like 2001. And they used to be super popular. I mean, people would line up, with generic tickets to get there. So I got super popular to me,
Yeah,
so.
No, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and going through some of the old Dragonlance modules, thinking about what I might need to do if I wanted to repurpose those as well.
So my thought was, we love Savage Worlds, and one of the great things about Savage Worlds is that we can convert, or we can run any genre in Savage Worlds. And so I thought, why not reach out to Carl and see if we can do a show about what's your approach for taking other things that you love and savaging them. Savaging, yeah.
Savage that. Yep.
Because, I mean, I love the Dragonlance Chronicles.
I do too.
At this last Gen Con that I went to, luck would have it that the Strange Owl booth was like right around the corner. Like, we were less than 30 feet away from Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And so my son, who had just finished the Dragonlance Chronicles, I bought him the Legends. So the what is it? Time of the Twins, Test of the Twins, War of the Twins.
Yeah, I believe that's right. Yep.
And he got to meet Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman and get them signed and talk with them. But I also know that those modules have a railroads look at those modules and go, "Woof, man, that's too much."
Well, they're trying to follow a book, right?
Exactly. So that's sort of, I want to say, antithetical to kind of the Savage way of doing things. So I'm really interested on what are your thoughts for adapting other things that we love into the Savage universe?
Sure. I think in the Savage Worlds, there's a couple of things that you have to think about when you're going to modify something existing. Obviously, we're talking fantasy. I mean, obviously we can, stuff from other game systems, but in the fantasy, it's what does a monster look like compared to your favorite? What do magic items look like? So in my adventures, magic items are a big deal, right? And in Dragonlance, they are too. Like, I have to figure out how to stat out a Dragonlance. And so it's a big deal, right? And then the structure of the adventures just have to look a little different, in my personal opinion, right?
Yeah.
That's why we're in Savage Worlds. I'll just throw one right out. I don't like wandering monsters in my adventures when I go to Savage Worlds, because Savage Worlds isn't an attrition system, right? So we're not trying to whittle down hit points, take a couple spell slots, do whatever, so that when you get to the next encounter, I don't like wandering monsters. Every monster has a purpose to be there. And so that's one of those things that I have to change and tweak. And if there is, well, then it's a quick encounter as opposed to an actual battle or whatever. So those are the kinds of things you really have to think about. So monsters, magic items, and then the overall structure and how encounters are put together, and how do you present your big bad ultimately in the adventure? Because again, Savage Worlds, what is it? A peasant with a pitchfork can take out a hero with the right exploding dice, right? So,
well, and I like what you say about attrition, because again, Savage Worlds is not a resource management subsystem, which traditional fantasy games tend to be, right? I mean, I love D&D and I love RuneQuest, but part of both of those games is how many resources do I have? Do I have enough resources to go further into the dungeon, or do I need to go back out of the dungeon because of where my resources are at? And so I feel like the only comparable thing, and because you brought up quick encounters, is really bumps and bruises is sort of the only thing like, the only sort of thing that says, hey, there was some attrition here. Don't worry, it's going to go away. But here's this thing that you're going to feel kind of going forward.
Yeah, I think so. For sure. Bumps and bruises is a great one. Fatigue, finding. So again, the structure of adventures kind of going around and around, but traps is an example of a structured adventure. You can't do traps the same. Again, this is all my humble opinion, but you can't do traps the same, because let's just look at a pit trap in D&D, right? You fall in a pit trap, 2d6 damage, whatever, or 3d6 damage. Well, but the person has 50 hit points, and it's really just whittling away.
Yes.
3d6 damage in Savage Worlds obviously is going to be potentially multiple wounds, which really puts you in bad space. So you're not going to just take 3d6. Nobody would, right? Nobody's that crazy. So would a trap be better to cause bumps and bruises? Like you said, if you fall into it, there is a penalty to it, but it's not deadly. Are you fatigued trying to get out of it? And so fatigue's rough. So fatigue can be bad, but it's better than having 3 wounds right off the bat. And hopefully you're avoiding the traps in the first place, right? So,
or what's more interesting? Like, how can I take a pit trap and make it more interesting? Like, does it close up behind it? Now the group is separated. Is there, a monster down there? So they have to find a way to, re-engage the trap so that they can get, recover their ally. Excuse me. Again, when you look at a lot of these things as sort of a timer in kind of more classic fantasy games, we don't do that in Savage Worlds, right? Because fun, fast, furious, those are the three keywords.
Yeah.
So we had a question from John Doom, and so he said, do you change travel / hex crawling, just completely ignore it when you're looking at converting something like this?
I think you go to a point crawl system instead of a hex crawl. Then you've got locations that are connected, sort of by waypoints, and you're moving between these, and there's multiple choices, just like in a hex crawl. But the idea of I go to a hex, I roll what's there, or if something's there, and then it's maybe a wandering monster. Okay, fine. And then go to the next hex. Go at a point. Do a point crawl more than a hex crawl. That's usually what I do. I think of it as now scenes that are going to be encountered as people move through the movement in the world, as opposed to, and then, don't forget, you want to do your interludes in there somewhere, right?
Right. So even when writing adventures for Savage Worlds or for, other products, it always amazes me. I want to make sure I'm hitting as many of the classic Savage Worlds mechanics as I can in a single adventure, right? Obviously there's going to be some combat, but also I want a quick encounter and maybe an interlude, and toss in a dramatic task, because we have more options than a random encounter, if you will. And again, please hear me. I'm running a 2nd edition AD&D game.
Nothing wrong with that.
I love the D&D oeuvre, the genre.
So let me give you an example where dramatic task is perfect to. So in one of my Dragonlance adventures, there's a dragon. It's Dragonlance.
Is there
And
also
it's
a
trapped.
lance? Okay.
Yeah. Well, there is a Dragonlance in one of them, but there's a dragon and it's trapped, and it is deadly, and you are going to die. In the D&D world, right, with the way it was written, you will die if you think you're going to stand up against it.
Yeah.
In Savage Worlds, dragons are tough. Absolutely. A lot of toughness and stuff. But, you can see somebody who's got it going on, standing up to them and hoping for some exploding rolls, throwing. So instead of doing that, I turned it into a dramatic task. You aren't going to defeat this thing. What you're trying to do is figure out how to get past it. Like, what do I do with my rope? How do I, because you end up trapped below it. So it's up here and you're in like a pit trying to get around. Dramatic. And when I ran it at the convention, it was just fantastic because we got to use that mechanism, and it's just as much fun to roll for, well, I'm trying something creative. I'm going to jump on its back and run up and jump off its nose. And okay, well, that's an athletics. Let's see what happens there. Let's get some tokens doing that. And in the end, it's just a lot more fun than, well, I think I can take this thing on. Well, you really shouldn't, but
you really shouldn't.
You might be able to, because, it is, Savage Worlds. And let's, again, with a pitchfork, you can take out a lot if you get the right roll. So,
so we had one person ask, is taking a Benny away as a resource attrition a viable, like a viable thing to put in an adventure? And I don't know that I would ever take a Benny away from a player.
I don't believe in, I believe less in taking away than rewarding, so you're good at something, you get rewarded. You're bad at something, you don't get rewarded. I would never take a Benny from a player if I could help it. There's plenty of things for them to spend on. You can make it so that they want to spend a Benny, and then that Benny's gone, but I would never take a Benny from a player. That's just a personal, they earned that through playing their hindrances or being funny or whatever. They earned it. So I would not take that away from them.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do a quick divergence because it's part of my job to hype all things Savage Worlds. And we have somebody in the chat who is a complete Savage newbie. So they asked, Chris asked, can we briefly explain the game and the system mechanics? Well, this is the game, Savage Worlds. It is a fun, fast, and furious, very pulpy game. And the core of it, I can explain in like 30 seconds. You're going to roll 2 dice. You're going to get a die for your trait rated between D4 and D12 typically. And you always get a D6 because you're a wild card. You're a hero. You're going to roll both of the dice that are appropriate to the test and pick the higher of the two, and the target number is 4. Every 4 you beat the target number by, you get a raise, which is usually like an extra benefit, and you only critically fail if both dice come up once. But the other thing, as Carl was alluding to, is that dice can ace, which means if you roll the maximum number on the die, so 6 on a D6, it explodes and you re-roll it. And as long as you keep hitting the max number on the die, you can keep rolling. In the horrid Headstone Hill game that I did, because Bob wanted to make sure that everyone knew he was on the level, he had a little dice cam, and he rolled like a 54 for damage at one point because his D6 just kept blowing up.
That happens.
Yeah. Excuse me. So what other, like, if you wanted to highlight another mechanic for somebody who is new to the game, what other mechanics would you highlight for them?
Well, the obvious one is dramatic tasks.
Yes.
That one. So that's the mechanic where the game master sets up a situation. Let's say one of my favorites I use as an example, Tabletop Tango. We do dramatic task. Little plug there, because we talk about dramatic tasks. Do an example. We've got a video that's 5 minutes to learn the basics of Savage Worlds. You did it in 30 seconds. It took me 5 minutes. So
hey, you did way better. Like yours is actually, like, your production value is fantastic. I'm going to put the link to the Tabletop Tango in the chat. Go ahead.
And so they set up a situation. Let's say you've got to wire a bridge up and the enemy's coming, and you decide what kind of skill you're going to use to well, first I got to pull the wire across the bridge. So I would use a skill, and there's one in Savage Worlds called athletics, which is all about, being able to run, jump, tumble, whatever. And then you would roll your die and you try to earn tokens. And the game master would say you need N number of tokens to succeed at the task. And you would do that in 3 to 5 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're constantly coming up with a creative way to use your skills and you might get bonuses, right? You become a real creative use of your skill. Like, and it's just so much fun because you're almost always towards the end of the 3rd round or whatever. You have to get maybe that you need that raise, you need that +4, and you need an explosion to just be able to do that last thing. I'm running for the plunger and I'm diving. And so I need to use a skill to do that. And bam, it happens. So that's a great mechanic. It's one of my favorites, of all the mechanics in the Adventures Toolkit. That's like my absolute favorite. So
I'm actually writing an adventure, and the big climactic scene has a battle going on, but it also has a dramatic task on whether you can remove this abyssal curse from one of the enemies and convert them back to your side. And so you've got to deal with everything else that's going on. So you got to multi action there, because you can take multiple actions in Savage Worlds. You just get penalties. Now the chat is jumping in with great mentions as well. Yes, so initiative is handled with a deck of playing cards. Every round, every player character, all of your wild card NPCs. So these would be kind of your important NPCs, and each group of individual threats get a card, and you go from ace down to 2, and if there's a tie, it resolves in reverse suit order. So spade, hearts, diamonds, clubs.
I look it up in the book.
Yeah, I've always got to remember. And if you get a joker, you can go at any time you want, and you get a +2 to your actions, and everyone on your side gets a Benny, which is this meta currency that you can spend to get re-rolls and activate different things. Yes, the role-playing aspects of the games are pushed. We didn't even cover interludes, which is basically you draw a card, and based off what suit you get to kind of narrate a little portion of your journey, what you're doing on your journey. There is downtime actions. There are quick encounters where if we want to like narrate something that happens very quickly, almost like a montage, we can do a quick encounter. I had a scene in the horror at Headstone Hill where the group decided, no, we are going to challenge the bandits in a box canyon with a Gatling gun. And I was like, I don't want to fight this out. Like, that doesn't seem fun to me. What was fun was the fact that the soldier that our bounty hunter was hunting was at the back of the box canyon. Like, I wanted to get to that. So we ran the running battle with the bandits in the box canyon as a quick encounter, because each player got to narrate what they were trying to do. They would make their rolls, and you kind of, adjudicate it there at the end. I'm trying to think of, there's so many fun rules in Savage Worlds.
Last thing I'll mention.
Yeah, go for it.
Tests and support.
Yes.
That is, so one of the things in combat in Savage World, or, you can test a foe, use a skill to make them more vulnerable or make them less likely to hit you, or you can support a friend. So if you're not a combat ace, you're in D&D, right? You're either slinging spells or you're sitting being bored, right? You can be somebody who's witty, and you can taunt your opponent and get them off balance, which makes it easier for your fighter to hit them. That's the last thing I'll mention as a great mechanic that comes in. And so I think we've hit all the big ones, right?
Yeah. I think we've hit all of the big ones. We could just give examples of how cool dramatic tasks are from now till, our time is up, because I love them. And I like mixing them with combat encounters, because I'm a fiendish GM, and I'm like, this is really important, but also this other thing is going on. I need you guys to manage both of these things at the same time.
Cool.
So Knights of the Smith Dinner Table said that they send all of their new players to your channel to get the overview of Savage Worlds.
Well, appreciate that. Yeah, we definitely have a variety, everything from beginner stuff to intermediate stuff to advanced stuff. And we look at products, give overviews of products, whether it's a setting, because another thing Savage Worlds has is a lot of settings as a generic system. So, and I do occasionally people go, I didn't even know this thing existed, this setting existed. Wow. Okay. Well, it's just because if you're in there and you're listening and you're watching when people aces come out and stuff like that, it's great to talk about that. So, we really enjoy doing it. So sometimes we do really deep dives, and unfortunately, they don't do as well as some of the shorter format. So I need people to watch the longer format stuff too, the hour-long deep dives, because they're fun to do, but they're a lot of work, and we want people to watch them. So.
Well, Chris, I think you were in the right spot because I think Savage Worlds offers just a ton of great mechanics specifically for if you want to write the songs and have them affect people, and taunting, and as Carl was saying, being able to distract or make your opponents vulnerable so the rest of the team can get in there. You could play a pacifist in Savage Worlds and still be completely invested in every scene that comes up. All right, so going back to our original kind of thing that we were talking about, and so you were saying that one of the key things when taking something and converting it over, and it really doesn't, I feel like this doesn't matter what genre we're looking at.
Yeah, probably.
Because I know that the Manted Man wanted, he can't wait to see what you all have to say. Currently working on adapting Suede to an action space opera game, which sounds just amazing. Grom says he does watch the deep dives, so thank you, Grom.
Thank you, Grom.
You said that when it comes to the magic item or the adventure or the monsters, right? All like the three core components of essentially any adventure. When coming to Savage Worlds, it's really about figuring out what's the point and what's the core concept that each of these things brings to the table. Like what's the core?
And feel savagey. Things have to feel, because, for example, in a monster with monstrous abilities, and if you just go into a monster manual and you just take it and you're going to flop it down, things don't match up with the way the mechanics are. So in Savage Worlds, a feel for Savage Worlds is things tend, if they're good bonuses, they're +2. If it's bad, it's -2. If it's really good, it's a +4. If it's really bad, it's a -4. But that's kind of what you get. Maybe there's a reroll.
Yeah. Going
much beyond that and saying, well, I use this example of like the Draconian. We were talking about Draconians have magic resistance. And in the book, it says, in one of the books, it says they have 20% magic resistance. In the D&D, it's like you roll, and if you get under 20%, that didn't work on it. It
doesn't affect,
And Savage World, that's just not the feel. We have things related to like arcane resistance.
Yeah.
And it's really, what does it do? It gives you a negative, a -2 on your ability to hit, or a -4. That -2, -4, +2, it's that feel that you get, and that's the balance that comes in. So you really can't just take a monster, slap it in, and call it good. Now, Savage Worlds does have some good in Fantasy Companion and Pathfinder. There's a lot of monstrous abilities that they lay out that lots of times they'll map. Like energy drain. I was trying to make something that had a draining force, there is energy drain, and they've balanced it. So you can take advantage of that as well. But it's really, magic items the same thing. Oh my God. I don't know how many times people are like, well, can I have like a +N sword? Yeah, +3 sword. Yeah, that's going to be way unbalanced. In D&D, where the armor classes go up and your ability goes up, a +3 is not that big deal. Like, look at a Vorpal Blade. I had to convert a Vorpal Blade. And if you get a 20 critical hit, it cuts a head off.
Yep.
That's a head scratcher. Well, maybe if you get a raise, it's like you hit the head, so you get that +4. And
I like that.
So
what's the core of it?
Yeah, it's the core. You get the called shot, you get the +4 that usually can do a wound if with that +4, and if you get over the toughness, it feels more Savage Worlds. You're not lopping off the head. It's a shame, but that's the flavor. If you do enough wounds to take a guy out, yeah, you lopped off the head, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the way you describe it. That's what happened, in the feel of flavor.
And if it's not a wild card, then sure, right? You're just wading through,
Yep.
taking heads. So how do you come to that core? Like going back to the Dragonlance example, how do you come back to that core of, hey, what is this really about? What is it that I want to focus on? What advice can you give the rest of us on just, hey, when you're reading something and you want to bring it over to Savage Worlds, here's how you really narrow in on the most savagey part of something.
Well, I'll use Draconian as an example. I love Draconians. They're one of my favorite things.
They're fantastic. They turn to stone when you kill them and trap their weapons, or they blow up.
But that's the example. Is when you look at like a description, and they did multiple. So there's the original AD&D, which is what I would use a lot. They did updates for, I think, 3.5 and stuff like that. So if you get the creatures in D&D, for example, and I'm not picking on D&D, it just happens.
No, we're talking about Dragonlance, right?
They have actions and reactions and this and that, and it's really just sit down and go, what is this thing going to do? So like your Draconian, you mentioned, if it dies, it explodes. Okay. It's got magical resistance. It may have poison, right? So this is what makes it. All that other stuff is flavor, right? And we can flavor. Beauty of Savage Worlds is we flavor stuff all the time. We add trappings and stuff like that. So for the Draconian, it's like, okay, it's going to explode. All right, that's the core. Now the question is, when it blows up, what's it do?
Yeah.
And you can say, well, what's it like? Is it like a grenade, or is it like something less than a grenade? Well, it's probably less than a grenade, right? It's not there just it's really supposed to be an annoyance, right? Maybe do a wound. So, okay, small blast radius makes more sense than a medium. Mm-hmm. And then maybe it's 2d4 versus 2d6. And that feels right? So it's the feeling that you get that this is the right way of handling it, and it's balanced. That you don't want to kill a Draconian and just have the player blow up, but you want to make it feel like they could blow up.
They could blow up.
Again, when 1d4s, I know they explode on a 1 in 4 chance.
Yeah, 25% chance.
People always talk about the mechanics and the probabilities, but honestly, it's still worse to have a 2d4 than to have a 2d6. Let's be honest. So,
so what was your biggest hurdle to overcome in getting this Dragonlance conversion done? Because you have a ton of notes. I'm going to put there's actually several of these deep dives that you can go check out. I'm going to copy this over right now. This is a link to your big deep dive on your conversion.
Yeah, that was more. That was one where the audience. It was a live stream. We don't do a ton of live streams, but the audience came in, waded in, gave us ideas. I think the biggest challenge converting is we already started hitting on it. It's like, what's the core? What's the, forget the mechanics. What's the core? What are you trying to get across? And then you can bring the mechanics as the flavor, and then look at how Savage Worlds would impact that. So you treat the monster, treat the magic item. It's got flavor. What's that flavor bring into Savage Worlds? That's the toughest part.
Yeah.
Is that, and then balancing. We know balancing is tough, but again, if you focus on the Savage Worlds-ish, the way things are, there's a reroll, there's a plus, that stuff starts just falling out. And then it's also powers. The powers are so nice and generic that you can almost anything like a creature has that's an innate ability. There's probably a power that can simulate that innate ability, and then you can have minor or major, so that it's like it has a, minor is it's just the base, major is as if it got a raise, and it's easy to do that. But that's the hardest part, is to wrap your head around what's the crux of what's trying to say. Same thing for a trap. You mentioned it in the beginning. What's the crux this trap is trying to do? It's trying to slow somebody down. It's trying to whittle away resources. I don't like the whittle away resources thing. Everything has a purpose.
Yeah.
But what's it trying to do? And then you may just throw it out. because
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. Something totally different makes sense there. And then from a combat standpoint, you got to also wrap your head around D&D, again, being an attrition system. The big bad can stand there and take punishment and deal out punishment. In Savage Worlds, you want to layer combat, have some mooks go in, get rounded up. Your bad guy is behind cover. He's not exposing himself. And then he's stepping out to do something, and then he's stepping back. Lots of adventures don't have that. It's really, you're just mono standing.
Yeah.
And that's because you're just going to trade hit points, and whoever trades them faster wins. Savage Worlds, you just can't do that. So you have to think about those sorts of things. And I feel like I rambled a little bit, but those are the kinds of things you gotta think about. So
it amazes me. This is just a thought that occurred to me, that the two biggest Wizards of the Coast games really both revolve around, can you get the other guy to count to 0 faster than you count back to 0?
Oh yeah. Yep. I mean, that's what hit points are all about, right?
Yeah.
They're the ultimate resource management problem.
So I'm gonna jump over here to another comment from Chris. You came to the right show tonight, Chris, because Savage Worlds has an amazing homebrew ability. So basically, the Savage Universe, which is I'm the community manager of that. We have a ton of different licenses for people who are wanting to produce content for Savage Worlds. You can go over to savageuniverse.com, go over to the Get Involved tab, and it's got all the information here, but I'll give you the high-level overview of it. If you want to make something for Savage Worlds and put it up on your website and you're not charging anything for it, there's a fan logo that you can put on there, and more power to you. If you want to do a podcast or a live stream or an actual play, there's a little logo that we just ask you to slap on there and a little bit of text that you include, and you're good to go. We do have something, because you're talking about the homebrew system, we have something like the DM's Guild. It's called the Savage Worlds Adventure Guild. It's on Drive-Thru RPG as well. And what I love about that as a creator is, one, there's just this amazing community around the swag program. There's a Discord channel that you can get involved in. There's always people who are out there who are willing to help, to guide, to review. And you get to keep your intellectual property. Anything you put up on the swag, Savage Worlds Adventure Guild remains yours. So if you turn it into a comic book, awesome. You can do whatever you want with your property there. And if you get to the point where you want to publish something on Kickstarter, go to crowdfunding, anything like that, we have an ACE license. And with that, we just ask that you submit a sample of your writing, your art, your layout. And don't be discouraged if we come back and say, okay, we'd like to see these changes made, because really our goal with our licenses is to interact with the people who hold them and give them good feedback. And the other thing is, my job is every Thursday night, I'm signal boosting someone in the homebrew community. I'm writing articles every week. I've got another article going up tomorrow on Havenwood, I believe. It's I need more coffee. But yeah, Pinnacle is supporting people who are making their content by providing a website and a stream that's just there to signal boost for them. So I think it's a great place to come to and write your own stuff for. Now, jumping back over to our adaptation, Venkel had a great question. How do you go into setting rules when you are making something like this? Like, are you trying to create your own? Are you hitting the fantasy companion and picking out, a handful that work? When's that dividing line between, ooh, I really want this to have its own setting rule, versus I'm just going to use dark fantasy, the little collection of setting rules that they have there in the fantasy companion, and drop them in?
Yeah, well, there's two answers. First, Savage Worlds has so many settings
really
people have done, and it's plug and and for the most part, they're almost always plug and play. So if you're looking for, and I have the the nice thing that I have a lot of these settings and I've read. So if you're looking for setting rules that add certain flavor, there may be one somebody's already done out there.
Mhm.
So like if you the secret files of Section D, they have something that does ammo tracking, so you don't have to worry about ammo tracking. And so if you don't want to worry about arrows and stuff like that, and I'm going to go pick it up after I shoot it, they've got something there. There's other settings that have that too. There's just a ton of stuff. So, but that being said, there are times when you just simply cannot. Now, I didn't find this in Dragonlance because again, it's fantasy, but there are probably times where you'll find something that just doesn't work. Like if you are going to convert the new Cyberpunk 77 or something like that, and you want to convert that, which by the way, my buddy who does the channel with me, he's in the process of doing that conversion or attempting to. There's no Savage cyberware, right? So you literally will have to figure out some setting rule to represent cyberware. Is cyberware going to be powers that you pick up using edges, or are they something different that you can buy with money? Well, you're going to have to figure that out and bring it to the table. And the flip side, of course, is there's settings that do have cyberware in it, and you can maybe go look and see if that makes sense. But I use that as an example. There's going to be times you just run into that. I've been fortunate that with all the settings out there, if I want something interesting, I usually find it in one of these setting books.
Oh, yeah.
And I go, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I could use that, and that would make a lot of sense for what I'm trying to accomplish. Of course, then you got to read all these setting books and remember who put that in.
Yeah. I mean, that is the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, John brought up Sprawl Runners, and Nice at the Dinner Table. It's like, oh, but Rifts has a great cyber run. Yeah, I mean, and Han Cluster has a great one, but they all work differently, and that's I think one of the beauty of Savage Worlds is what works best for the flavor you want to bring to the table. And
someday I'll find a hacking subsystem that I actually prefer. So I haven't found one yet. And Sprawl Runners, Interface Zero, there's a lot of them, and they're all very good. It just they've never worked for me. Have
you tried fast hacking?
We worked through it. Yeah, it's close. It's about as close as it's going to get. We're ready to just little tweaks there, and we're probably ready to run with it. The next science fiction one, I just finished a science fiction one, and now I'm doing a fantasy campaign. Next one I do, where we are going to have a lot more hacking and stuff, then that'll be a chance to kind of leverage, I think. But I digress. Anyway, so all great products. I'm not disparaging them.
No. I think you're highlighting one of the strengths of Savage Worlds is the fact that, one, if you want to try and do something with Savage Worlds, go to savageuniverse.com, look at the Ace and the swag products, go over to Drive-Thru RPG, look at the swag products, because you're going to find several people who have come to that same conclusion and maybe give you some either a plug and play system for you to use, or at least spawn some interesting ideas for design choices of your own to bring into.
And swag is cool for another reason swag is cool is if you're thinking like, oh, the wealth system in Savage Worlds isn't quite what I wanted. I want something a little more. Somebody has done a swag product that does the wealth system. And I did a video that that talked about wealth and Savage Worlds, and then brought in this great swag product that enhanced it. And I wish I could remember the author, but I think it's Enhanced Wealth or something like that. I just found it on swag. It was $1.
That's awesome. All right. So you're the guy to ask. I'm looking for a good mass combat or like domain. Is there anything out there in swag?
Let me think. First off, the mass combat in Savage Worlds Adventure Edition is good.
It is. It is great.
And I have a video on how I do mass combat.
I'm going to check that out. And
the difference I do, and maybe this should be written up as a swag, I don't know, but the difference is the part where the wild cards interact with the battle, where it's like one roll, and that roll is if it's good, they add a plus. If it's bad, they get bumps and bruises. I totally get rid of that, and I zoom in and let the players talk about things like, you know what, before the battle, I'm going to teach the troops how to be better. Okay, well, that gives you a +1 situational modifier that you're doing, and it's like we zoom in and the kind of things they're doing are, it's almost like a dramatic task within a mass battle, in a sense. And I think that works a lot better than just, you know, if you roll good, great. If you don't, too bad. You know, you waited in. That's what I do. So you can check the video and you might disagree with how that, but it's what I do on. I like mass. We just got done doing a mass battle with starships where the players were on one starship and there was an entire armada that they were working with to try to take out another armada that came in, and we zoomed in and we zoomed out, and then they went down to the planet while the battle's going on. I mean, there's just so much stuff you can do with that abstraction. That's anyway. I digress. I just go off on the tangent. I love it. So.
Because this is why I had invited you onto the show. I was actually noodling with the idea of doing a round or two, because combat's so fast with Savage Worlds, like doing the zoom in, and then based off what the players decided to do on their mass combat roll, doing a round or two of combat and then zooming back out, and then the next sweep of the battle and then zooming back in. So kind of going from the high level to the very personal. So this is just a selfish question. When we were talking before the show, you were talking about how you really like having these high concepts behind the games that you run. What do you mean by that? How do you actually like when you talk high concepts? So like one of my favorite D&D settings is Planescape, which is really, in my mind, about the ontological reality of the alignment system violently fighting it out in the minds of people in the multiverse.
So I'll give you
some of my players were not on board with that.
Yeah. Sometimes they aren't, but
I wanted to do a faction-based philosophical debate game, and they were like, I want to go out into the plains and kill monsters. So when you talk about
so I'll give you examples. And a lot of this comes from, again, I do mostly modern. I don't do a ton of fantasy, but this comes from pulling from the headlines. For example, I thought to myself, what would happen if we did have a singularity and there was a digital dark age, right? If everything goes away, all this data on servers just disappears.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's only the books that are left over. And some of these books are old now because it's all digital and all of the technology disappears. And so what would happen if now they kind of ground up to now they're the Victorian age? What would happen as they try to figure out the stuff that they have no idea? Right. They have a basic science book. It was published, but all the stuff that made nanobots and stuff like that, they have no idea about. And so we explored that world. The last science fiction campaign I did, I said, what if we are living in a simulation? And then everything fell from that. So how did the players learn during a simulation? What is the guy who's controlling the simulation? And it turned out to be an entity that, like the master control program from Tron kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, it all flows from that. These just big ideas. Like the campaign I'm doing now is, and this is kind of stolen from Dragonlance a little bit, let's be honest, but what if the gods disappeared?
Yeah.
But they really didn't disappear. They're being held captive. That's the concept. So now everything can flow from that and the adventures, and then they get a little piece of information here and a little bit, and it's all the players, whatever they do and how they do it, and they can go in whatever direction. And I just have to know that, oh, they went to this old temple. Well, maybe I can slide a little bit of, the old gods in there, and they might understand something. But I'm not writing out the Dragonlance adventures. I'm not writing out, the railroad, because I don't have to, because it's a concept. It's not a.
And I think that's the key to kind of everything we're talking about. We're talking about monsters and magic items, and we got a good question from Benkel about converting a spell or a power. Do you fix the trappings, hard set them, or are you more willing to let the players make it up? For me, I'm always willing to let the players make it up. When somebody's like, I cast, and this is from Savage Worlds. I've been doing it so long in Savage Worlds that when I went back to this AD&D game, and somebody was like, well, I cast Magic Missile. I'm like, cool. What does it look like? What I'm really asking are, what are the trappings of your spell? Because I want to know what makes it personal and unique kind of going forward.
So another plug, So Mastering the RPG, which is a podcast that I host as well,
which I had in the chat and was ready to hit
our,
enter.
Literally our last episode is flavoring magic and special abilities. So like if you're in a D&D, how do you flavor special abilities? And because again, I come from Savage Worlds, and trappings is just part and parcel.
Yeah.
Right. There's not a melts acid arrow, magic missile, burning hands. There's not a right. You've got bolt or blast, and everything is trappings with synergies or not. Or I mean, it's just, and I completely let the players take that on. I mean, that's what makes their character unique. And for monsters, any power that a monster has that acts like a power, it's a trapping of a power. Yep. Right. I mean, so again, another easy conversion thing when you talk about the core of what makes a creature a creature.
Awesome.
Too much fun.
No, and it is probably the thing I convert most. Like that has probably had the most influence on me as a GM is the idea of the trappings in Savage Worlds. And I now have this in the world that I was playing in. I had also been running Savage Worlds games in it, and I have this random chart so that whenever they find spells, it's not just that they find the spell, they find this one guy's version of the spell and has bonuses and penalties, basically trappings worked into it. I roll randomly for the trappings. And so it's like, well, I may now prepare this guy's version of the spell over the one that I have because I like the additional like twist or bonus and penalty that comes off of that. And it's just like you were saying, synergies or not, I love it.
Cool stuff. Yeah, the power system I like a lot. I think it's well balanced too.
Yeah. So Chris asked a question earlier. Why did they decide against a D20 system? Here's the thing. Savage Worlds been around for 20 years. Came from Deadlands, which is 25 years old. And
don't you want to use all your dice?
You want to use all your dice.
So you got a so it's D4s, D6, D8s. You just don't use a D20, but you use all of them up to D12. You have all this dice. Why not use them all the time?
So that's one of the like. I'm hoping to run this for a group of kids at a game store over the next couple of weeks, and that's how I'm going to pitch it. I'm like, well, we could play this game where you basically only roll one die, or you can roll all of these dice.
Yeah, exactly.
And usually that's enough to sell it. All right, so we had another question here. Speaking of trappings, what's the best way to address synergy with elements like ice and water, or electricity and water, when it's proposed by the player? I'll let you go first, and I'll.
Well, there's two elements, right? If we're talking about fantasy, right? There's things that can be resistant to, and then with the synergies, they're no longer resistant. And then two, it's like the electricity, somebody standing in water and they get hit by electricity. The way I usually work with my players on that, it's like, what do you think this would do? You know, your trappings. How do your trappings really work? And usually it turns into, again, the flavor. It's a +2, it's a -2, or it's bonus damage. You know, so it really tries to stick to the flavor of the game. So, you always get bonus damage without having to have a raise when your trapping has synergy against, you know, your Pokemon that's the polar opposite, right?
Right.
So, and that works because it's well balanced. It's worked within the system. It could have just been easy as be a raise, versus, well, if you're shocked, then we go to shock rules, and I'll write a system for that. And it's a lot of work, and and the game already has a lot of flavor that helps with that. So that's how I would approach it, honestly.
I do the same thing. I either give it a straight +2, +4, -2, -4, or a free bonus die of damage. Or if the player's being really clever, you know, maybe it goes from a small blast template to a medium blast template because, you know, they're working with the, hey, we're, you know, one guy's knocking over this thing of water or pushing the guys back into the stream. I'm going to hit him with, you know, my bolt that is also electric. Okay, well, I've played enough Divinity Original Sin to know how these spells can possibly interact, and just, you know, like you said, push it back on the player. 9 times out of 10, if you just say, well, what do you think you want? What are you thinking it should do? Your player is going to give you an idea that's going to make them happy if it goes off. Maybe not identical to the way they're imagining, but close to it, which adds to player buy-in.
And most people are reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, on the other hand, it gives you a ton of great ideas to use against that player later on in the campaign when they're like, well, why does this guy get a bonus 5 damage? Well, you're standing in water and he's hitting you with electricity. Oh, wait. No, that's right. I used that against you, didn't I? Yeah. The monsters learn just as much as the players do.
Yeah. And it's fun. I mean, it's fun to have. And the trappings, the electrical, fire, the elements trappings, the players I have, sometimes their trappings are so much more interesting and different. Like, it's shards of glass falling from the sky. And it's like, well, what synergy does that work with? And they have to help you figure that out, because you're not going to figure it out on, it's like, well, creatures that are, fleshy and don't have any armor on, and maybe it does more because it's shards. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you think? What do you think should happen? So
that's right. Yeah. And if they're investing that much into their trappings, I guarantee you they're going to be that much invested in coming up with synergies for how these trappings interact with the world.
Absolutely.
Well, Carl, thank you. This was awesome. Like, it was everything I hoped it was going to be. We got some good advice out there. We got to introduce a new person to Savage Worlds, which I didn't have on my show notes, but I'm always glad when that happens. Any final thoughts on, for me, the joy of Savage Worlds and converting things to Savage Worlds is I'm not having to explain a new game system every week or, every time we switch genres. I can say, all right, guys, you can take all of the system knowledge that you have, but now we're going to play through, a Planescape adventure or this, Cthulhu Mythos adventure or, the Han cluster, transhuman science fiction. That's for me is the real joy. And so like, I love savaging up a lot of different things because I have modules, I have adventures that are really close to my heart that I love, that I grew up running, I grew up reading, I think just are really well designed, but I really would much rather play them in Savage Worlds. And so that's kind of the joy of this, of doing an episode like this, is to just kind of get it out into people's minds.
Yeah. One day I'm going to go to my storage unit and I'm going to pull out all my old dungeon magazines, not dragon magazines, dungeon magazines, where they publish, and start going through those, because there was so much good stuff, and it's so easy. It'd be so easy to savage it up, and one of these days I got to do that. But there's so much other stuff to do. So
it always amazes me because I'm always on the lookout. I've got this list that I keep on my phone of books that I'm looking for and magazines that I'm looking for. And I have found, I've got maybe a third of the Dragon magazines now, because I love reading through the old articles, especially like in the early days when TSR was like, oh man, here's an article on Traveler, and here's an article on, what Games Workshop is doing. They were just like, hey, this magazine's, it's the rising tide raises all ships kind of thing. I cannot find a dungeon magazine anywhere I go to save my life. I feel like people hoarded those because the adventures, like you said, they just have so much good information.
And that's a shame, because they published many years ago the first 250 episodes or magazines in a CD-ROM.
Yeah,
and I've got that on my shelf and on my computer, and so it's so easy to go through. If they had only done that with Dungeon, it'd been so amazing, but lost to history almost, I guess. So
I read them for the articles too, John. I appreciate that. See, here's the thing. So John Doom, I consider a close friend, a good friend, and he's going to be running our Savage Worlds Pathfinder game that we're starting tomorrow. And this guy gives me crap on every stream, and I love it. And he gave me crap in our Discord channel because I was like, wait, I have to come up with a last name for my character and a 120 word background. And he was like, well, if you just don't want to be invested in this game, that's fine. You can just show up and kind of drift through the world. And I was like, all right, one, I have a platform to comment about this every time I want to bring it up. So, and two, I'm like going to be super invested going forward. No one will be as invested in this campaign as much as I am, John. So, but then he calls me like the Dark Tower, and it's all good.
It's all good. It's all good. Eric's my partner on Tabletop Tango, who does some shows with me. He's my foil because he's one of my players who does all the creative stuff, does the crazy things that teaches me what's possible from a player standpoint. So, and he knows the rules so well, in and out. So it's great to have him around too. So definitely, when you're watching the channel, it's not just me. Eric's all over that. And so.
You need guys, go check out Tabletop Tango. It is a wonderful channel. Check out, I'll put the link to that in the chat again. Check out Mastering the RPG. Going to put that in the chat as well. And Chris says, this all sounds amazing. Now to read up and hopefully join an online game. Good luck with that. Again, check out the official Savage Worlds Discord. You can Google all of these: the Savage Worlds Discord, the unofficial Savage Worlds Discord, which if you want to get into creating your own content is a great place to go to. And then if you want to find an online game, I cannot highly recommend enough, go to Google Gaming with Gage. Every Monday night, he's got a Savage Worlds game going. It's a one-shot. He gets a ton of people, not just fans, but like people at PEG will show up and run games on Savage Worlds Adventure Night, the Swan Night, Monday night game. You can there's one every week, 4 to 6 slots. Just sign up for the games you want. They are newbie friendly, and he's got a great Discord channel to just be involved in. He's got it all like nicely partitioned. So if you want to be part of some channels, you react with an emote. I don't even know how this works, but then it like unlocks different, like when you go in there, you get to say what I want to be a part of, and it unlocks the different sub channels. And I'm like, I think it's sorcery is really what it is.
I don't understand Discord. I just use it. I don't understand how it works.
That's right. John Dew and I were talking about something. He's like, the best thing about, one of the nice things about Discord is asynchronous communication. I'm like, yes, like 100%. John says, yes, Gaming with Gage and friends Discord will 100% get you into a game. Yeah. Thanks, John. Tink had joined the Gaming with Gage Discord this year, I think. It has been super helpful and nice community. So Tink has a question for you. You did a 5-minute Savage Worlds. Do you have a how to play Savage Pathfinder video?
So the answer to that is kind of, in the sense that Savage Pathfinder is Savage Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So the 5-minute video on learning Savage Worlds applies to Pathfinder, but we also did videos on Savage Pathfinder class edges, which is sort of from a character perspective, one of the core concepts that was added to Savage Pathfinder that's not in Savage Worlds core. And so we did do videos on on the class edges, and then you're ready to go. You're Savage Pathfinder ready to go.
That's what I said. It's just Savage Worlds. They just published it in its own unique rule book so that you didn't have to have the core Savage Worlds book with it. You're going to be fine.
And class edges are cool. Class edges are cool. Yeah.
She's playing a witch, and the class edge, the hexes are just amazing. And if not, Tink, John Doom will just, kill your character.
And make sure you get the advanced player's guide for Savage Pathfinder. There's a lot of good stuff in that.
So much good stuff in that. And the Curse of the Crimson Throne Adventure Path box is just gorgeous. Just gorgeous. Mike did a great job adapting that adventure path and all the unique little twists. That'd be another great place to start if you want to really look at how to adapt something to Savage Worlds. Look at Rise of the Rune Lords or Curse of the Crimson Throne, because those are savaged versions of very iconic Pathfinder adventure paths.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a good takeaway right there.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Carl, thank you so much for taking time out and
thanks for having me.
Chatting about Savage Worlds. Hopefully, we'll have you on again. And again, anytime you want us on Tabletop Tango, you let us know. Like,
I gotta think of what the next puzzle or game show could possibly be that we could run on a live stream.
I think could we do like Hollywood Squares, or somehow do what was the one that had the whammies? I just want to be able to yell, "No whammy, no whammy, no whammy,
stop." Yeah,
exactly. What was that one? I don't even remember what that was
I can't remember what that one was either.
Because it clearly wasn't called Whammy.
No.
But we all remember.
That's all we remember. We don't remember the name of the show, So, I like the Hollywood Squares. We could get Shane. Maybe he could be center square.
Yeah,
and be what was Paul Lynn? He could do the Paul Lynn.
I will definitely I will lean on Shane to make this happen. Like, that would be amazing.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week. Next week, I will be interviewing Jacob, who has a new. Let me pull this up real quick so that I don't. Do a new release called The Rebels of Havenwood. I'm going to do an article going up tomorrow on Havenwood, and then I'm going to have him on the show next week to talk about this new offering for Savage Worlds. So until next time, go out and play Savage Worlds. I'm talking right to you, Chris. Go play some Savage Worlds, learn about it, and may all your dice ace. Have a good one, everyone.